Thank you, Kieran. So I have about 10 years to learn about molecular typing, okay? So thank you, Alison and the BlooDHIT team for inviting me to speak here at the inaugural conference. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. So my name is Moira Keogh. I'm the Chief Medical Scientist in the Red Cell Automated Donor Grouping Laboratory in the IBTS. So today I'm going to talk to you about the impact of a changing donor and patient demographic on blood group typing, specifically here in Ireland. I have no conflicts of interest to declare. So in my talk today, I will discuss the donor base that we have here in Ireland and the differences in red cell phenotypes between donors born in Ireland and outside of Ireland. I'm going to look at the patient cohorts that we have here in Ireland. And finally, I'm going to present some case studies. Everybody loves a case study on the challenges in sourcing some of our rare bloods and what we are trying to do here in the IBTS to solve these challenges. So it's an international conference. I'm going to start with some basics. This is Ireland. So we're an island nation with a long history of outward migration, and this is echoed in our blood types. So the phenotypes that we see in an Irish blood group donors, Stella, you're going to see these people now when you're in Dublin over the weekend. It's similar to many Caucasian populations. So here we have 3 typical Irish women out for a walk. These are the donors which we see the most. In the last 2 to 3 decades, we have seen a much welcome surge in inward migration in the country. Always Irish people, we went outwards, now we are welcoming people into Ireland. We're a much more diverse population than we were, and it is evident as we look around our country, as we see our new Irish and also in our patient population, but we are not yet seeing this demonstrated to the same extent in our donors. But why is it important to know where in the world our donors and patients are from? Blood types, they're genetic. They're highly associated within ethnic groups. And I'm going to show some examples of antibodies that can be very clinically significant for our patients. And they have impacted some of our patients here in Ireland in the IBTS. So, the north of Sweden, really, really specific, quite a small area in the north of Sweden around Umeå. You see pockets of incredibly rare antigen-negative phenotypes, so for VEL and PP1PK. So these are 2 clinically significant high prevalence antigen types. In most populations, prevalence of these will be 100%, but this quite small area of Sweden, it's a high number of people who are negative for these types. In some areas of sub-Saharan Africa, up to 35% of people are U negative. You see about 35% in around Nigeria. So the U neg phenotype is associated with people who are big S neg and little S neg. There is no known donor in Ireland who is U negative. I'm going to come back to this a few times in the talk. Where are we going to next? We're going to Japan. So 1 in 1,700 Japanese people are negative for the GR antigen, with the prevalence of the antigen close to 100%, again, outside of Japan. So a person's ethnicity can have a significant impact on their blood type. If a patient presents with a rare antibody, the sample will get referred into the IBTS or RCI lab, do lots of weird and wonderful things, and assign a specificity to the antibody. If we cannot provide antigen-matched blood for our Irish donor cohort, we have to look further afield. So we go to the rare banks around the world. It's quite a small community, but they're very, very helpful. So we will go to a rare bank in another country. Sometimes we get fresh units. Typically, they're frozen units. And when our specific request is put into the frozen bank, they thaw this blood for our patient and ship it here for a transfusion. So I'm going to go back to the north of Sweden for a minute. So we had a patient in the IBTS in the past with myelodysplastic syndrome, or MDS. And I think a lot of people here in the room can appreciate the huge transfusion requirements associated with this antibody. So we imported over 100 units of Vel-negative blood from this patient, all from our rare banks around the world. And I think I'm using the word literally correct, but we literally bled them dry. We could not get any more units for this patient. So we went back to our books. Where in the world is there a high population of this Vel-negative phenotype? And we went back to that little pocket in Sweden. So we contacted the Swedish Blood Service. But our issue was Sweden don't do NAT testing. NAT testing is a mandatory test to release our blood products in Ireland. So they couldn't just give us a unit. So what they did was they bled the donor for us with an extra tube for NAT testing. So this unit was sent over with the extra tube, and our wonderful scientists in NAT laboratory did the additional testing for us, and we could release this unit and meet all of our requirements. And in fact, they did it last year as well. We had an antenatal patient with an anti-PP1 PK, so it works. Look, all this is to say that knowing the ethnicity of patients and donors is hugely important. We need to understand our patient demographics so that we can better serve them. And I need to demonstrate that today in the doc. So let's look at some published data and unpublished data from our laboratory. So Anne Brown and Michelle Birmingham are here also. They have a poster. I'll give it a look. As part of their respective MSc projects, they did a deep dive into donor populations in Ireland and how significant the inward migration is for the range of blood which we can supply to the country. So for these studies, we looked only at first-time donors. So the IBTS, we don't yet collect donor ethnicity. Now, we intend to start doing this really soon, but currently we do not. So instead of ethnicity, we looked at first-time donors born in Ireland, or BII, and compared the antigen prevalence to first-time donors born outside of Ireland. Anne's study in 2015 analysed 3427 donors, 14% of which were born outside of Ireland, and Michelle, a few years later in 2019, analysed similar number of donors with 22% of the donors being born outside of Ireland. These were the antigens that we looked at within the study across ABO, RH, KEL, KID, Duffy, and MNS systems. There was no statistical difference observed for RHD, BK, KID, FYA, or M. For RHCE, there was a statistically relevant difference in both studies with the occurrence of the R101 phenotype, more commonly seen in donors born outside of Ireland. So Brown et al. Reported the frequency of 24% R101 for this cohort, compared to 17% for donors born in Ireland. 2019 data shows that 51% of our donors who were born in Ireland are big S positive, compared to 56% of donors born outside of Ireland. So big S neg is more common for the born in Ireland population. Analysis of the ABO system showed some significant differences between our two donor cohorts, which we're going to look at now. It has been a long time since such a study was done in an Irish context. So what did we already know about frequencies of ABO before this? The Blood Group Antigen Facts book, my Bible, reports the percentage of Group O in a Caucasian population to be 44%. However, note the caveat, there is major variation occurs between ethnic subgroups. Ireland has, it's long been known that we do have more Group O people in our population. So this study published in 1951, so we have to go all the way back to 1951 for previous data, has a percentage of Group O people in Ireland from combined studies in the 40s and 50s as 53% Group O. So what did we find? There is a statistically significant difference across all of the groups, which ties in with data that's known for ethnically Irish population. And have a look at that. Frequency of Group O in our first-time donors born in Ireland, 57%. So compared to that to our first-time donors born outside of Ireland, there's a difference in frequency of 16%. Just a reminder, the previous values, so known Caucasian population, 44% and 53% in the 1951 study. Are we keeping up with demand? So I'm going to focus for a while now on our patients and donors of African ancestry. Due to the prevalence of sickle cell disease, there's high transfusion requirements within this patient cohort. So we have some interesting data on our donors here in Ireland and what to expect currently when we test daily in the lab. Now, if we dig a little deeper into the data that we have from our studies, 1.5% of our donors born outside of Ireland were born in Africa, which is 0.27% of our overall first-time donor cohort. That's just within first-time donors. Looking at 2016 CSO figures, that's the Irish Central Statistics Office, 0.47% of people identified as being born in Africa. So we are looking at a gap between the numbers of African ancestry people in the country and the numbers of donations which we are currently collecting from this cohort. The reasons for this are multifactorial, as our previous speakers would have discussed. And it is something that we're working hard to remedy here in the IBTS. Now, it's not a huge gap, but it is having more of an impact than it would initially appear that it could. The last audit that we did looking at imported blood products to Ireland, it was conducted by Dr. Peter McCarthy, showed us that 42% of blood we imported over a 10-year period was for patients of African ancestry. Not having a supply of blood with some of the phenotypes that are rare in an ethnically Irish population has a disproportionately negative impact on patients of African ancestry, and this is something that we are looking to change. So we have a significant patient population here in Ireland who have sickle cell disease, and we are delighted today to have representatives from Sickle Cell Ireland attending the conference, and I believe that you do have a stand outside. So the patients with sickle cell disease are mainly centred between Crumlin's Children's Hospital, or CHI Crumlin, and St James's Hospital for the adult patients. So as you can see here, CHI Crumlin have approximately 400 patients on their books who have sickle cell disease, with a similar number in the patient group in St James's Hospital. So Enda Downs, he is a scientist in the transfusion department in Crumlin, recently did a study into the patients with sickle cell anemia in his facility, and I'm going to share some of Enda's data today. So this table shows the breakdown of RH phenotypes of the CHI patients, and I just compared to what we know for the Irish donor cohort. What should be very striking here is the differential in the RO phenotype. So RO phenotype means the person is RHD positive and negative for big C and big E. 62% of patients with sickle cell disease in CHI Crumlin are RO phenotype. We have 1.25% of this phenotype in the Irish donor population. The immediate impact of this is it can be difficult for us to supply blood for these patients who really desperately need this life-saving transfusion therapy. Also, in the IBTS, it has a knock-on effect. We will supply group RHD negative for these patients, and that has an impact on the stock of the group RHD neg blood for the country, which, as you know, is the universal donor type. So if we look at the immunisation rates in an Irish context, Emer McGrath, she is working in University Hospital Limerick. I'm very happy for everyone doing their masters to share their data with me, thank you. So she conducted a study of immunisation rates in a large Irish hospital down in Limerick over a 2-year period. Emer looked at antenatal patients and inpatients and looked at immunisation rates in these groups. So antenatal patients, 0.45%. Inpatients, about 1% of them have a red cell antibody. But look at Enda's data from CHI Crumlin. 8.8% of patients in CHI Crumlin with sickle cell disease have an allo antibody. I'm going to reiterate here, these are children, so all of whom would be getting RH and K-match blood on the Irish transfusion programs. And the data from the Limerick Hospital patients are all adult data. So it is even more striking than it appears. But it's not all doom and gloom. So look at the top 2 antibody frequencies in the CHI patient cohort. 28% of the children in Crumlin with sickle cell disease have either a KPA or an anti-LUA. These are non-clinically significant antibodies. They are very easy for us as a blood service to match. But look, over 10% have an anti-D. Now, this is most likely due to, as Professor Chow was telling us, the complexity of the RHD gene. And it could be reduced by more discrete matching of the donors, which, again, Stella's team have done so much work on. So on the face of it, we're doing okay. And antibody frequencies, they are a testament to the work that is being done within the facility. But, there's always a but. We do have a patient population in CHI Crumlin with anti-U. And as I mentioned earlier, we do not have a single known donor in Ireland with the U negative phenotype. So in the event that one of these patients require a transfusion, we are looking at a potential delay of up to 72 hours in getting blood for the patient. And it doesn't just have to be the rare antibodies. It may be the frequency of certain antigen types across a population that impacts blood provision. So let's look at this other case study. This is a patient with sickle cell anemia who developed an anti-JKB and an anti-BS. The hospital requested that FYB was prophylactically matched to prevent further immunization. This patient, and that was an appropriate request, the patient had made an anti-JKB and an anti-BS over a very, very short space of time. We needed to do what we could to prevent further antibody formation in this patient. So the table shows the relevant prevalence of the requested antigen types within what we know for the Irish donor population, or IDP, and also a hypothetical black donor population. The percentages, I've taken these from the antigen, the blood group antigen facts book. So the BDP covers people of African and Caribbean ancestry, and you will know there's quite a difference in the antigen prevalence here. What does the table mean, though? To bring it to a more practical context, for this specific donation, we're looking for this phenotype in the known antigen frequency, and the type represents 0.00003%. That's 4 zeros. So in a black donor population, we'll be looking at 0.25%. So even more practical terms, here in Ireland, we can expect to bleed one fully matched donor every 14 weeks for this patient. In a black donor population with similar donation rates as we'd be looking at here, they would have 57 donors per week. I'm going to preempt a question, what did we do here? So we switched from group B to group O. We swapped the RO requirement for little r. We called in every known donor that we had of this type, and we screened every unknown donor that we had. And we got there without having to drop the FIB requirement, but it was by the skin of our teeth. It's not just patients of African ancestry who can have rare or complex transfusion requirements. And lately, we have come to look at our own donors. And in the context of the increased observed in inward migration, can we meet these requirements ourselves? So I'm going to present two case studies now. The efforts the IBTS have made in recent times to be more self-sufficient in the provision of rare blood and the success and failures of these. So our first patient, an antenatal patient with an anti-JK3. So JK3 patients, they require blood, which is JK A neg and B neg. We do not, at the time, I'm not going to give a spoiler, have this type. So we looked to see where was the biggest concentrations of JK3 neg populations, and we identified New Zealand, Polynesia, and Finland as a focus of our investigations. So we wrote to donors who said they were born in these countries and asked them to donate. Our donors are amazing. 40% of them came forward, gave us a sample to see if we could find a match. Alas, alack, we did not find a match, but it started us thinking on this route, can we be more self-sufficient? So on to our next case study. A patient presented with the very rare antibody anti-GRA. Again, looking at the area where this antigen type is the highest negative occurrence. It's in the Japanese population. 1 in 1,700 of Japanese people are GRA negative. So then we looked at the frequency of Japanese donors on our database in the IBTS, and we didn't have many. I think it was 230. And that was going back for as long as we had records. So a bit of back of the envelope maths, we had a 3 in 10 million chance that we would find a compatible donor for this patient. So in this instance, we took a more passive approach. So instead of contacting every one of these donors, say, come in, give us a sample, we just tag them. So if any of these donors presented, there was a flag in donor grouping. We got the pilot tube and we would bring it into RCI, and they were putting this donor's blood up against the patient's plasma. GRA is so rare, there is no commercially available anti-GRA, so we had to use the patient's plasma to screen. Lo and behold, we found a match. So, Coach Gainey from RCI, she phoned me and she said, Moira, we were after getting a compatible, that tube you dropped in is compatible. I said, oh, Coach, will you run it again? She said, I've done it 4 times. I was like, oh my God. So it was very, very exciting. 3 in 10 million chance, and we got our donor. So not all days at work are exciting, but this was incredibly exciting. So where in the world do we go to next? What are we doing and what do we need to aspire to do? Number 1 is a very simple move, and it is going to be very effective. So very soon we're going to start capturing donor ethnicity in the IBTS. This is going to enable us to target testing of specific ethnicities to identify rare blood donors in an Irish context. So I'm going to come back to BlooDHIT in 2024. I'm going to be telling you all about the buckets of U-negative donors that we have. The individualised donor risk assessments, they're going to be in place at the end of the month. Very, very exciting time for the IBTS. It really, really is. It's going to remove some of the deferral policies which were in place for our African ancestry donors. Also, malaria testing, end of Q1. Yeah. So we are going to have malaria testing very soon in the IBTS, which again is going to open up the doors to many more donors who were previously deferred. Once we start identifying donors, what do we do then? We need a frozen blood bank. We need one in Ireland. Seeing is our finance director still here, but we need one. So if we have a frozen blood bank in Ireland, and we did actually have a frozen blood bank in Ireland before, so if we can get the frozen blood bank running again in Ireland, it can reduce the time it takes to get rare blood for a patient from days to hours. And new technologies. We want to do what Stella does. We want to start typing our donors at a molecular level. We want to match our donors to patients at a molecular level, buddy our donors and our patients. And why not set our sights as high as we can? I'm talking BlooDHIT 2030 now, right? So you probably saw during the week the NHSBT have announced details of the world's first clinical trial on lab cultured blood cells. We're not going to do ourselves out of a job just yet, but this has enormous potential to help solve some of the rare blood issues that we have worldwide. Finally, I want to acknowledge the scientists and the doctors who shared their data with me, so I can present it here today. And here is some of the team in the donor grouping laboratory in the IBTS who work very hard to make sure that all of our patients have the blood that they need. Thank you very much.
You can say there, Moira. That's brilliant. I'll say a few words. That's fantastic, yeah. By the way, the Moira and the Koch thing, that's called the Cork Mafia, okay? Or even our chief executive is from Cork. By the way, they gave me a badge that says IBTS United Kingdom. So I expect to be deported sometime soon. But can I give a reach out to my 3 colleagues, former colleagues from IBTS, Lauren, Asma, and Andrea. He's a bit elusive, actually, but at least Lauren and Asma, and you're very, very welcome. A couple of things to me, Moira. The 2021 census report said 70,000 of our citizens claim African heritage. That's 1.4% of a 5 million denominator. So, as Niamh mentioned this morning, and so did Helen, and so did our colleague from the Sickle Society. So, if it's half of 1% born Africa, clearly there are a significant number of people not born Africa. You know, they're obviously second generation Irish.
We're seeing them.
But that has implications for malaria. That's the point, Niamh, you know, in terms of, so that's one. The other thing, I know my last gig is that when I saw BOI, I'm thinking Bank of Ireland. But so you've got a near perfect talk, but you just got to change that descriptor. Questions, comments, discussion. Professor Field, Professors never go away. Emeritus Professor Fields.
Right. The U negative, of course, is of interest to me when I was doing my hematology degree in South Africa, because it's actually an absence of the complete glycophorin B molecule. It's actually S minus as well, big S, little s minus. But, and of course it's resistant to malaria. So there is a little bit of, advantage living in a malarial area for that particular circumstance to happen. So it's very prominent in West Africa. But in Southern Africa, you get U variants, which is obviously an alteration in the U molecule. So it's going to be a difficult one to find enough U minuses for your...
Oh, we'll find it. We did have a patient with the U variant. I remember. Yeah, we've had some, yeah. But, yeah.
Yeah, so good luck on that. Thanks.
Moira, just a comment. It was a perfect talk. It was absolutely brilliant. I can't believe you found a donor with the same kind of risk that we would say that we have for finding a HIV. That's actually, I don't know, that's kind of scary.
Ours is more, yeah.
Yeah, yours is good news.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, has that donor, just out of interest, or can you say become kind of a regular donor now?
Oh, Niamh.
COVID
kicked off.
So she's Japanese. She was in Carlo IT. I'm into detail, right? She went back to Japan. She was age 20 and she was a potential donor. Sorry, Moira, I'm stealing your thunder.
No.
We did. I don't mean.
We're a tag team.
We're very tight. This Ms. Keogh was my professional colleague, my strong ally, and my personal friend. So I'm allowed to say this, but we lost her. She went back to Japan.
Yeah.
She was 20 years of age, but she was available to donate.
Yeah.
Which is the main thing, you know. Sorry, Moira, I didn't mean to do that.
Thanks for a lovely talk. This is actually a question of some of the one of your collaborators. So, did that data that you presented on the immunisation rate between Limerick and Crumlin, do they actually have a documented immunisation rate of the Crumlin sickle population, or was that the subsection you were being seen in Limerick?
The ENDA's data from CHI Crumlin. So that was his MSc project, and that was for the full sickle cell patient cohort in Crumlin. That's the alloimmunisation rates just for the kids in Crumlin who have sickle cell disease.
And is there a corresponding adult rate?
No, I don't have that. I was talking to James's, and they don't have it yet, but they are looking to have it as an upcoming master's project, and it's that I'd be very interested in seeing.
Yeah,
well, my sense is that it would be higher. Yeah.
Can I just come in there, Moira, as well? And we have to compliment our clinical colleagues, because this has been reported. The range of alloimmunisation in sickle patients, it can be as high as 24%. It's very similar in St James's Hospital, where Dermot works. Rates of 8 and 9% is very, very good in intensively transfused patients. So it must be the extended matching, Moira, or at least the ABRH.
Well, with their children, I don't think they've had. It's the 8.8% that we had, that ENDA's data from Crumlin. I mean, they're kids, so I don't think they've just been exposed as much.
It's immune responsiveness as well, and obviously the key thing is donor exposure.
Sure.
Yeah. But to be honest, I think Dr. Toohey, Dermot, has a similar result, 8%. You choose not to comment. I mean, I think she has. Maybe Helen knows, or Eileen knows.
BlooDHIT 2024.
Huh?
BlooDHIT 24.
Say again?
BlooDHIT 2024.
Yeah. So we're going to finish on a high. Are there any more questions from my colleague?
That the Irish sickle population are probably a bit unusual in that they've had a nearly completely Caucasian donor population with a different recipient base, where it would be more mixed in other countries where there's a reasonable number of sickle patients.
Absolutely, yeah.
Hello. Fabulous talk. Not that I understood half of it. I'm neither a scientist nor a medic. I'm at the other end of the chain with Welsh Blood Service. And I think reflecting on the variety of what we've talked about today, and Mark's NHSBT presentation to us about recruitment of donors, I just wanted to make a comment about the vital nature of the whole of the relationships across the supply chain. We can only do the sance bit. if we've got the donors coming through the door. We only need the donors if we've got the patients in the first place. And just that reflection of how important it is that we keep those relationships strong across the whole of the supply chain. That we, working at the collections end of that supply chain, we get those donors through the door so that you can do the fancy bit that you do, the important stuff that you do, and just a reflection on that, the need for that relationship to be strong in order for us to be able to keep meeting patient need.
I absolutely agree with you, and I know that the team within the IBTS who are looking to diversify the donors, I mean, we have scientists, we have doctors, we have the nursing staff, marketing, so we really are trying to get a multifaceted approach to it. And I did actually think that it was very interesting in Mark's talk as well, how he spoke about checking in with staff as well, and to see that who are taking the blood, are they comfortable with the questions that they're asking? And yeah, a really good point, yeah. Okay, thank you very much.